I worked for the PDGA for 5 years and I had never even heard of the PDGA Constitution. They were just asking me to gut the members' rights. If a staff member accidentally discusses something that oversteps, they're under threat of a lawsuit.
What's up, Disgenerates? I'm Jefferson, and this is the Disc Golf World. In the past couple years, the PDGA has become a punching bag. Some might call this harsh, others will point out the bad decisions that gave them this reputation. And no, I'm not talking about renting out the driving range. I'd rather discuss issues like conflict of interest, which made a splash over on the Smashbox podcast with guest Matthew Rothstein, who is a candidate for the PDGA Global Board of Directors.
When members don't see how the event bids are processed, when they don't understand the decision matrices that go into awarding those bids, and they also see board members who have ties to events that are in question, it doesn't take a major league conspiracy theorist to kind of connect those dots and to start to be suspicious.
I'm not going to read through these comments. Instead, I'll go through the titles of the people that made them. Then you can choose if they are significant enough figures to care about their opinions. Starting off with TDs from prominent events, the Las Vegas Challenge, Texas State Championships, and the 2021 World Championships. Then you had the former PDGA executive director, along with also former staffer, saying outright that there is conflict of interest problems within the PDGA. Not the best look. That's why we talked to Matthew to pick his brain from the history of the beginning to how he believes it can all be fixed. First off, who the hell is Matthew Rothstein?
I've had reform on my mind since I was an employee at the PDGA, and I was always really trying to kind of work the channels there, speak to the senior directors and try to, make changes from within. And so when I left the PDGA a little bit disillusioned, there was this thought of like, the board would be a great channel through which to influence the way the PDGA is moving.
Matthew has a perspective from the inside being a former PDGA employee, but even then, he didn't know about such important history of the organization.
The fact that we had this incredible document, this PDGA Constitution. I worked for the PDGA for 5 years and I had never even heard of the PDGA Constitution. So how is that possible? That's a great mystery for me to dig into and to understand how did this history, not only what was the history, but how did it get lost? So yeah, this was kind of the crumbs that led me down the trail that has opened up all this history that I've been sharing.
And down the rabbit hole he went, exposing stories that go untold to 99% of disc golfers.
The PDGA was, on the verge of giving away its world championship. It wasn't going to run the disc golf world championship anymore because it didn't feel like it was right for a North American organization to do it. Steady Ed said, "No, that's our world title." Basically, I've been running the world championship in one form or another since the mid '70s, and we're not going to be giving away the world championship just yet. And yeah, so the sheer force of his will was enough to kind of change public opinion on that topic, which is pretty cool.
That's right. In 1985, the PDGA almost gave up their world championships to WIFDIF after they announced their own worlds happening over in Sweden. You can go check out Matthew's full history lesson in his own video. Fun fact, that Sweden Worlds did go down, so technically this year's Finland Worlds is not the first in Europe.
The top players from the U.S. who had just competed in the Tulsa Worlds went over to Sweden and competed. And by all accounts, it went off well. Although there were some controversies following the event, which I didn't really dig into. But um, they had promised $25,000 in prize money. That was one of the big headlines that got everybody to come over from the U.S. to compete, and they ended up actually kind of reversing on that payout. At one point, they held a vote and decided not to pay any of that prize money out. And then eventually there was a compromise reached, and I think they paid something like $10,000 out of the $25,000 they had originally promised. And so, it was kind of like it was well organized on the surface, but then when you dig a little bit deeper, you saw that things were just as chaotic and unorganized over there as they were in the U.S. And the one who really pointed that out, who kind of aired all the dirty laundry from Sweden to help make his case, of course, was our old buddy Steady Ed. He was the one who really highlighted those problems and said, not so fast, let's keep the PDGA running worlds.
A little controversial. However, what never gets brought up was the complete shift in how the PDGA operates. To be fair, majority of us never experienced the old days of the sport. Shit, when this switch happened, I was only 5 years old. During this phase, around 3,000 members actively were paying their dues. However, it's crazy to see how shortly after the founder of the sport dies, basically the foundation of his beliefs were stripped from the organization he again founded.
The timing was interesting with Steady Ed passing and then very shortly after, like all of these changes going down. I don't know if I'm willing to say like there was a direct correlation there. They're like, aha, Ed's gone, now we can do whatever we want. It's a little conspiratorial. I don't think it went down like that. But the way I read the board minutes, and that's kind of the best insight I have into the way this process happened. And then eventually reading chat forums, because the PDGA ran this uh, discussion forum. It was called discussion. It seemed like it was just kind of a mission. It was an issue of mission creep. They started they wanted to make some real logical changes for efficiency, to update the document to kind of reflect the way the PDGA was doing business at the time. But those kind of sort of administrative changes were the kind of main rationale for getting this revision process started. But from speaking to some of the people that were involved with the revision process, it seemed like pretty quickly there were a few members of the board who kind of were annoyed with members I don't say asking too many questions, but kind of exercising their rights a little bit too loudly, if that makes sense. Making maybe unreasonable requests like we want all these documents, we want all this access that the Constitution said. And so there were some of the board members who wanted in this revision to take advantage and to get rid of some of those member rights. And one of the attorneys who was working on the revision when this became apparent to him, he wrote at the time, it's in the discussion forums that look, I said I wasn't going to do this rewrite because it became obvious that they were just asking me to gut the members' rights. Um, this was not about efficiency or updating the language. This was a major change in the way the organization was going to operate, and he didn't want any part of it. But they forged on, and they proposed the new bylaws, and the new bylaws passed.
When members shout corruption, this is where we can look back at. Fundamental rights were stripped away. Is it a surprise 20 years later there's problems?
The potential conflict of interests with board members who have ties to events, and things like the non-disclosure agreements and the gag orders that are going out, you know for staff and for board members. Think about how, what a change that is, what a drastic change that is from what we see in that original constitution, where it's open meetings, all the affairs conducted in order, in the open, all the information accessible, to now we've got these NDAs where, man, if a staff member accidentally discusses something that oversteps, they're under threat of a lawsuit. That's going to really prevent it's going to prevent staffers and board members from really speaking their mind and communicating with members in the way I think they should.
Even more wild, when looking back at the chat logs, they knew this would pass with little contest because the lack of voter turnout.
Learning about the PDGA Constitution, all of these kind of members' rights that used to be in place that got removed, that really put the meat on the bones of my campaign. Then I really thought, okay, now I can write a document that kind of tries to recalibrate and restore some of these things. And that's where I came up with the Members' Bill of Rights.
Here's the proposed Members' Bill of Rights. Hard to argue with that as someone who pays a yearly fee to be a part of the club.
The people I've gotten the most pushback from are like the insiders and the current board members. But reaction from the general community has been really positive. You've seen the good engagement online. Um, what was really exciting for me, and maybe the most nervy part of this whole process for me, was sending out the Bill of Rights to kind of the first round of like my closest inner circle of people from the disc golf world to review it and give me their honest feedback. And that included, people like Joe Fight. It included players, current touring players, world champions, people that are household names. I wanted to see, is this, is this crazy? Am I crazy, or is this something that there's an appetite for out there? And man, it was clear cut. There was no ambiguity there. Everyone I sent this out to said, yes, this is long overdue. This is what me and my friends have been talking about. That was so encouraging, and that gave me the confidence I needed to go out and put this in front of the nominating committee and to put it in front of the voters.
Go vote if you want what's best for the sport. I'm not even saying vote for Matthew necessarily, although you should. But if you complain yet don't do the due diligence to know the people wanting the job, that's on you. There's passionate disc golfers that want to create change. It doesn't happen right away. It won't even happen after this election.
The president of the board is the one who really sets the agenda. So it's likely that my proposals wouldn't even be able to come up for a vote, maybe even within the first year. As I've been talking about these ideas to people, almost almost to a person, the only real individuals have given me pushback on things like more transparency, opening up processes, more information are sitting board members and high level, people at the PDGA. And then that's understandable because, you know, um, right now they're used to operating a certain way. And then when you talk about shining a spotlight on their activities or asking them to kind of conduct their business in front of the membership and have more to kind of answer to and answer for, that can make people uncomfortable, and that's completely understandable. I do feel like there is likely one or two current board members that would be very sympathetic to my agenda, even if they don't agree with like all 10 points or going all the way on something like open board meetings. Maybe they want to meet me halfway. I do know there's a couple board members that would be sympathetic, and then the real plan would be to continue this campaign next year, even though I wouldn't be running for a seat, but trying to recruit like-minded candidates, trying to encourage the candidates that are on the ballot to make their position known on these transparency issues, and then if there is a real wave, if there's a real movement within the members to want to see these changes, I think that we could see those results through the elections, and it'll probably take two successful election cycles, I think, to see some real change.
There's plenty more preventing real change, too.
One of the things contributing to the status quo, the way things are, it's kind of a self-fulfilling cycle where candidates, especially new candidates, ones that are not sitting on the board currently, they don't know what happens on the board. They don't know what issues are really on the table. So it's very difficult for them to come in with a specific policy proposal or with specific critiques. Um, I'm in kind of a unique position because even though I'm not an incumbent, like I've been within the organization, so I've seen how the machine works and I've got my own kind of point of view. But for an average kind of new candidate, all they've really got to present is kind of their broad vision for the sport, their own experience and qualifications, and their own personality. And while those are all important things, especially like the experience and the qualifications, not so much the personality, although that's important too. Like to know what a candidate stands for and what they intend to try to accomplish when they're when they have their seat. That seems like pretty crucial information for a voter who wants to make a decision. So I'm glad you guys see the logic in it. I certainly see the logic in it, and that's kind of why I'm trying to run things on my campaign the way I am.
I'm going to say it. Go vote if you seriously want change. Yes, we can all keep bitching online, but that's not really going to do anything. We had the Constitution, it's time for the Bill of Rights. Drop a comment if you knew about the PDGA Constitution. I had no idea. Kinda insane to actually see the principles disc golf was founded on and what the legends of our game wanted. Too bad that got destroyed and lost forever. My question is, why aren't these stories more well known?
It used to be, darn near impossible to do this kind of research because you just had to happen to be sitting on a stack of 40-year-old magazines. And if hadn't been collecting those, or if you didn't find an old collection on eBay that, you'd have shipped out to you, you couldn't do this kind of research.
I'm a nerd for this type of stuff, and if you are too, let us know because I would love to make some history videos of the sport. We seriously can't let this valuable information get lost forever, and right now, that's exactly what's happening.
One of the common refrains that we would always go to is like, hey, if you don't like this, go vote. We're at heart, we're a democracy. The members have the voice. Go out and make your voice heard. And I made that argument over and over again so many times, and eventually I'm like, well, wait a minute, is the organization really a democracy? Like, is that how it was built? Is that how it was intended? What's the history there? And so that was the start. That was the impetus for me going back and digging. Okay, well, what do the bylaws say? Okay, well, how long have the bylaws been like this, and when did they change? And I just kept pulling on these threads, and before I knew it, I was back in like the 1940s with Fred Morrison, like trying to figure out how Whammo, got control of the sport and all this. So it was a great adventure. I went back in time, and then I've kind of slowly worked my way back to the current era. And in that process of discovery, my mind was totally blown. There was so much about the PDGA that I didn't know.
It's not only the lack of people wanting to do the work to tell the stories, but also the ability to do that has a deadline.
Also had pretty good discussions with Ted Smethers, who is featured pretty prominently in the disc golf history video, as well as others. Joe Fight, Rick Rothstein. These guys were all involved back then. I get great stories from them, but I said it earlier, like the memories are fading, and I don't want to overstate this, but a lot of times. I'm having these conversations after I've already done my research and kind of asking them questions about what I've found, and a lot of times they don't remember. I'm saying, hey, this happened. Can you tell me about this? And they're like, I don't remember that. So it is a little alarming because again, all this valuable history, our heritage, is fading along with those VHS tapes.
But then we got the Flying Disc Museum.
I don't know exactly when the Flying Disc Museum went up and started archiving all of this old material, but within the last 5 years, I would say that Mike Hughes out of Phoenix started the Flying Disc Museum. And a lot of people know it because they have this great collection of high quality photos of old discs and collectors' frisbees, but they also have a great print section of all these old magazines. And so that was really something that opened up this as a possibility in the first place. And
That solves the problems for preserving the beginning history. However, there's tons of videos hidden in homes of footage of old disc golf that will be gone forever. Not lost, but gone.
this stuff, this old technology, unfortunately, it's deteriorating. So, there's kind of a clock ticking on a lot of this material. So we've got these tapes that are deteriorating, in damp basements across the US and across the world. And we've also got, this founding generation of our sport that are aging, they're passing away. A couple of Hall of Famers are passing away every year. Tom Monroe, Victor Malfronti this year. So I kind of feel like there is this sense of urgency to capture this history while it's still available.
Big thanks to Matthew for joining us on our first ever, whatever we're going to call this new interview series.
So, next year, I've been plugging this a little bit, but next year is the 50th anniversary of the PDGA. It's going to be a big deal. The PDGA is going to be making a lot of noise about it, and I think there will be a natural rise in the interest of the history and how we got to where we are. So I'm going to try and take advantage of that. That's why I'm targeting to get my book finished and published by next year, and then my plan is I'm going to go hunting for funding to turn it into a real high quality multi-part docu series because I think that's what the sport deserves. Our history is incredible. The stories I found are amazing, and I know I'm not done digging that stuff up. There's going to be even more incredible stories that come to the surface. Obviously, be remiss if I didn't say go vote. Check your email if you're a PDGA member. Mine went to my spam folder, so if it's not in there, check your spam folder. You can search for PDGA elections. I think that should bring it up if it's anywhere in your inbox. And then, of course, please do go check out my Bill of Rights, which is tinyurl.com/PDGA bill. That's the Bill of Rights. And then the documentary that we've been discussing is tinyurl.com/PDGA film.
Hopefully you learned something new about the PDGA or disc golf itself. Make sure to go vote in the elections because it's your civil duty as disc golfers. Let us know who you want us to interview next, and if you made it this far and haven't subscribed yet, what the hell are you even doing?
I've never had a PDGA number, right? So in my career,
How dare.
yeah, absolutely. So convince me why I should.
Because you believe in the leadership of the PDGA. Maybe you don't. right now, but ideally it would be because you love disc golf. You are, maybe you're not a PDGA member, but you're an industry member, as a content creator. And so you certainly are a stakeholder. And a real government doesn't just represent the people who vote. A real government represents or considers the perspective of everyone who has a stake, in the decisions that they're making. So, yeah, whether or not you ever decided to become a PDGA member, I'd hope that the PDGA has your interest in mind. That especially as a media person, like, I want to see them more willing to take questions, more willing to make appearances, more willing to put information out that you guys can go look up and then discuss and analyze on your show. So, I think if you saw the PDGA doing those sort of things, I don't know for sure, but I think you'd likely be more inclined to kind of support the organization. They were just asking me to gut the members' rights. If a staff member accidentally discusses something that oversteps, they're under threat of a lawsuit.